My name is Kieran Lyon. I'm a psychology teacher, and what I'm going to be doing over these set of videos, including this one, is I'm going to be talking about some psychology books that a lot of people, even a lot of psychology students, never get the chance to read. And so I'm going to be trying to summarize this. This week, we're covering Self-Efficacy, the Exercise of Control. And this was written, it's been published in 1997 by Albert Bandura, who is one of the most influential, most cited, most well-respected psychologists of the 20th century. And the whole book is about a single belief. It's about one belief, one idea. And this belief, if you can foster this belief, if you have this belief, I'm going to tell you what it is, will improve your psychological health, physical health, athletic performance, academic performance, job performance, really any domain in life in which you're trying to move toward, pursue some kind of goal is made easier if you have this belief. And this belief is called self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is, in so many words, your belief in your ability to plan out, to organize, and then to carry out plans in order to achieve your goals. So self-efficacy is your own perceived problem-solving ability. Now, you don't exactly have one self-efficacy. I mean, at the personality level, you kind of have general self-efficacy, which actually loads onto the personality trait of conscientiousness, but you have different levels of self-efficacy for different skills. So I have one level of self-efficacy for my driving ability, one for my teaching ability, one for my cooking ability, and so on. And so it's domain specific, you see. But self-efficacy is your belief in your own ability to solve problems. And, well, it has a few different names. Some people call it agency, some people call it mastery, some people call it competence or perceived competence. It has a few different names. But I'm going to call it self-efficacy. This term was coined by Bandura, and so for the sake of ease of communication, I'm going to call it self-efficacy as well. Before I get to talk about this belief itself and where it comes from, I'm going to have to give a little bit of a background. So, Bandura was working in the 60s onwards, and before then, in the 50s and before, the field of psychology was dominated by the theories of the behaviorists. The behaviorists were people like John Watson and B.F. Skinner. And the basic idea was stimulus response. The idea that the behaviorists had was that you have some stimuli comes in, and then because of that you have a behavioral response that comes out. So it could be rat, disgust, it could be snake, run. Input and output without any cognitive, which is thinking, without any cognition, without any computation in the middle. And the idea of one of the implicit behaviorist ideas is that you're kind of an automaton. You're kind of a machine that's at the whims of the environment. Now, Bandura was growing up in Alberta, up north in Canada. It's actually living far further north than most of the people in Canada live, and he was living on the frontier. And his father was helping to build the railroads. His father was working building up the railroads. And so Bandura, from an early age, he was watching people transforming, improving the environment to improve their own lives. And so Bandura wasn't particularly convinced in this behaviorist idea that you're at the throes of your environment. And if I was to say one word to describe Bandura's conception of human beings, that word would be agency. That it is the case that a lot of what happens depends on your environment, but it's also the case that you have the ability to change the environment yourself. If you want to know more about that in terms of genetics, you should look at gene-environment correlation, by the way. But I don't have enough time to talk about that now. So, self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to act out in the world in accordance with your goals to change your environment. Okay, then we go to the study of motivation and self-regulation. So what we knew from this, and what we actually covered last time, in the last video about Carver and Shear, was that movement toward goals generates positive emotion and motivation. But movement away from threats reduces negative emotion. Now, what Bandura found was that whether or not that emotion is produced, what emotion you feel in response to a stimuli, depends on this self-efficacy, depends upon your self-report of this belief. And so what he found, in so many words, is that if you're lower in self-efficacy, you're more likely to be anxious and depressed, because the less you believe in your ability to change your environment, the less you will believe you're able to move toward your goals. That makes you feel depressed. And the less you believe that you're able to move away from threats, and that makes you anxious. And this is a great way he summarized it here in page 39 of his book. This book's about 600 pages long, by the way. People who have strong beliefs in their capabilities approach difficult tasks as challenges to be mastered rather than as threats to be avoided. Now, I need to clarify here that self-efficacy is not the same as self-esteem. So self-esteem is a bit more vague. The whole idea of self-esteem is your own perceived valuation of yourself, whether you think that you're worth something. It's a value judgment. Self-efficacy is something a bit more specific. So the idea of self-efficacy is that there are things that are in the world which are random and chaotic, and yet nevertheless within that there are things that you can do better. Now, some people opposed his self-efficacy idea about agency. It's like, are you saying that people deserve the things that happen to them? No, I'm not saying that at all. Now, there are a lot of reasons in life, a lot of misfortunes that can lead to people having bad outcomes. But nevertheless, it's an unbelievably healthy belief, productive belief, a useful belief, to tell someone that there is something that you can do to make things better. William James, he's another great psychologist, puts it very well, is that if you're lost in a forest, it's healthy to believe that there's some path out, because if you don't believe that, you're just going to stay there forever, lost. And so this is how Bandura described it. Denial that people make causal contributions to the paths of their lives carries the dispiriting implication that people are powerless to affect any personal change in their lives. It's a patronizing prescription for apathy and despair. And what that means is that, in so many words, it's better to choose agency, it's better to choose responsibility and goal pursuit, because the alternative is demotivation, is emptiness. Okay, so we have this belief, and I've discussed this belief. The question is, where does it come from? And what Bandura does is, over his decades of research, he found 4 different ways where this belief can be derived, and the first of which is mastery experiences. Now, mastery experiences they're experiences of your own problem solving, and you have to start small, so it has to be kind of done in a graduated manner. Now, the behaviorists had this stimulus response idea, you see. So if someone was scared of snakes, Bandura was working a lot with fear of snakes, because a lot of people have fear of snakes. It's kind of an easy model of learning to study compared to a lot of other things. And what the behaviorists had, their idea was that, well, you have the stimulus of snake, and then you match that to the other stimulus of threat. And so what we should do instead is we should take the stimulus snake and pair it with non-threat safety, give you a whole bunch of snakes, throw snakes at you, put you in a big room full of snakes in a non-threatening environment, and then you'll be fine, and then you'll overcome your fear of snakes. But that was just silly, because it turns out that you'll perceive that as very threatening, and that will just be another traumatic experience. And so Bandura's idea, how we treat people, this is one of the bases of behavioral therapy, is to start small. It's like, okay, you're scared of snakes, we talk about snakes. You can't talk about snakes, we've not got there yet, okay? We talk about worms. Once we can talk about a worm, it's like, well done, you could talk about a worm. Then we talk about a snake. Well done, you could talk about the snake. And then it's like, well, what can we do next? Well, maybe I can show you a picture of a snake. It's like, well done, you could do that. Then we can go to the zoo with a snake at the other side of the room, behind glass and so on. And so every single time you've done these things, you take out the task and you break it up incrementally in such a way that you've set it up in terms of mastery experiences, in terms of games that you have won. And then you don't exactly need to believe in yourself after that, because now you have a repertoire, you have a portfolio of games that you've won. That builds your self-efficacy. That's the number one way to build up your self-efficacy. Now another one is vicarious experience, which is modeling, learning from others, social learning. People learn by example. And what Bandura found is that what you can do is you can learn from others, and if you want to get self-efficacy from others, generally speaking, you have two kinds of models. You have what's called a mastery model, who does it perfectly well, and you have a coping model. And what he found is that a coping model, if it's a complicated skill, tends to be the better model at developing self-efficacy. This is what a coping model looks like. A coping model is someone who has more skill than yourself, because you need someone with more skill than yourself to learn from them, and is someone who struggles and goes through difficulty and yet nevertheless succeeds at the end. So we have Spider-Man. I do not own this image. Obviously, this belongs to Sony. I have to say this for YouTube. What we have in the new superhero movies is the good guy's overpowered and he just wins immediately. No, you don't want that. You want what we have here in the original 2001 Spider-Man film. You don't want to see a hero succeed. You want to see him fall. You want to see him fail. Not exactly die trying, but get close. And then you want him to succeed. And that gives you self-efficacy vicariously. It tells you that the hard work pays off. And it also makes him relatable because he has to struggle. Unbelievably powerful belief. The next way you could learn from, next way you could develop self-efficacy is what's called verbal persuasion. So someone to tell you that you can do this, and it has to be precise. It can't just be buzzwords. They have to say, okay, you've done A and B and C and D, and you can't do E, but based on these experiences, it's likely that you can do this. Okay. And it also has to come from a source that you actually see as an authority, someone you actually believe. And finally, your self-efficacy depends on your mood and your physiological state. So if you're in a bad mood, if you're experiencing negative emotion, that's going to temporarily reduce your self-efficacy. And also if you're more physiologically aroused, which is to say more activity in the sympathetic nervous system, your heart is pounding very quickly, that can be misinterpreted as oh no, there's a threat. That can make you feel anxious, reduce your self-efficacy. So that's temporary. But I'd say the first three are the main sources of how to get self-efficacy, and I've put them in order. And so this is a very important psychological book. He also wrote a great article about this in 1977. Another one was in 1994. That was a very brief one, an Encyclopedia article about self-efficacy. But the basic idea is that if you want to improve your psychological and physical health, what you should do is you should get the best thing you can do is find out whatever it is you're aiming toward, break it up into small tasks, and then pay attention. Then start small. Maybe you'd have to start smaller than you'd think first of all, and then what you can do is act out in the world in accordance with those goals, starting small, and then you pay attention to all the games that you win. And that's the basic idea of self-efficacy.